welcome back. I am with my friend David. This is my hookup with solar. I think everyone has a friend in solar, but David knows a lot that I didn't know and was able to brief me on many things that I thought you need to come on the podcast. We need to chat. So, David, tell us all about you.
Yeah, my name's David Northup. I'm the owner of Sunup Energy. We've been in business for about 3 years now. I've been in the solar industry for 10 years, so it's been quite some time. I've helped over thousands of customers go solar in my career, dating back all the way to 2016. So, yeah, for me, it's been a really great ride, and it's been really awesome to meet a lot of customers and help them go solar.
Yeah, I love everything you're doing. And I love that you took the time to break down a lot of things that I, as a realtor, did not know. So I've helped a lot of people move their solar over when they purchase a house. And that's been super easy. I was surprised to hear that that is not the case for a lot of agents, but I'm also shocked that all agents aren't using a buy down. I'm like, what is wrong with you? What are you talking? Why aren't you getting credits for your people? What are you doing? Anyway, I digress. I think it's important to understand that the transfer is really easy. It's been really easy for me, but that's my first question when I go into anything with, especially PG&E. I say, what are your bills, and do you have solar? And if you do have solar, I want to know what the deal is, how much you're paying for it, what your bill was before, so I can make sure it's a good deal. And you educated me on a lot of things I wasn't even aware of the other day. So can you kind of, I don't know where you start with that, but like break that down for a homeowner who's like, I heard that solar's not a good idea because my Aunt Molly got it and she didn't like it. Like, but you have people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really first starts with what type of solar program did you go, right? So as a
Okay.
homeowner, did you pay cash for your solar system? So you own it outright? Did you finance it, whether it be through a solar company that offers loans, or a local credit union? Those are becoming a lot more popular nowadays,
Oh,
where
interesting.
homeowners actually will finance their projects through their local credit unions, and it works actually more as a personal loan. So it is not tied to the home whatsoever. It's a personal loan. So when you go to sell your house, there's not a UCC1 fixture filing on it, which is just a mechanics lien on the equipment, right? Until that
Thank you
solar
for
is paid off.
explaining that.
Yep. And then the last thing is what's really popular nowadays is what's called a solar utility program, or a PPA, which is called a power purchase agreement, where you're
Okay.
just simply buying power at a cheaper price than PG&E currently. So I would say, as a homeowner, those are your first three things that you want to look at. What type of solar is on there? More importantly, how did that previous homeowner purchase the system, or did they do a PPA program? Because that's all going to kind of factor when you go to actually buy that next house. As far as the loans, if they did go through, let's say, a solar company, back in the day, when interest rates were very high, before obviously we had the big dip, right?
Yeah.
Solar financing was actually very expensive. So when I started in 2016, 2017, the cheapest loan rate you could get for solar was almost 12.99%.
Wow.
It was very high. There was still a UCC1 fixture filing on there.
Mhm.
And then these banks started getting really smart, which was they decided to do almost buy down, just similar like real estate, where
Uh-huh.
you can actually get a lower interest on your solar, but it actually was tied to the cash price of that system. So,
Yeah.
for example, I've heard plenty of clients that were like, well, my friend or my sister got solar and they have a 1.99% interest rate, or they have 0.99% interest. And I tell them, I said, banks are very smart, right? They don't just hand out free money.
Yeah.
They have to make a return on their investment somehow. So let's just say if you bought solar cash, several years ago, and you did one of these loans, maybe the cash price was $30,000. I'm just throwing out a random number.
Sure.
But if you did the buy down rate at 1.99, your loan was actually, if you looked at your contract, was $55,000. And there'd be
Uh-huh.
15, 20, $25,000 in these buy down fees, which gave you a lower monthly payment, sure. But when you actually look at the actual contract, that
Mhm.
contract was inflated quite a bit. So that's another thing, because it's almost like if you buy a car and you buy
Right.
it for 20,000 over sticker, and then you go to try to sell it later. Well, that system is not valued at let's say 40,000 after you spent 5 years buying down or paying down those interest rates, and
Right.
and that's a hard figure too. So it's not like I'm going to make extra payments and not pay that extra 20,000, and they're called dealer fees.
Uh-huh.
That is locked into that loan for 25 years. So if you pay it off early, you're just paying off those dealer fees. So that's one big thing, to really ask if it was a loan like that, what was the interest rate? You want to look at the contract, because that solar will not be valued nearly what it was if that person would have paid cash. So that's one thing, a lot of customers have to really look at, or homeowners. The other thing you have to look at as well is that, the credit unions is probably the best way. And I actually partnered with a local credit union maybe 5 years ago, and I actually explained to them how these buy down rates work, and how economically, if you're looking at it purely in a stance of what am I going to pay over the course of a 20-year loan with buy downs versus a higher interest, it turns out better for the homeowner if they would have went to a local credit union and got a 6.99% 5 years ago, rather than the solar loans. So I really advise my clients throughout the years not to do the buy down fees, purely because of the fact that if you end up paying that loan off early, you're just giving the bank their money, right? That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So that is really important. So that's one thing you want to look at. The other thing is the power purchase agreement.
Okay.
I think there's been a lot of bad stigma with the lease, which the leases were very popular from, I'd say, 2013, 2014, upwards of about 2017.
Okay.
Solar City, who's no longer around, were setting a lot of these people up, and it wasn't just Solar City. There's multiple different companies doing this with leasing solar, where it locked that homeowner in, and you had to pay that solar payment for 25 years. And it did make it really difficult for real estate agents to go ahead and sell a home that had this lease on it, because ultimately some people just said, "Hey, I don't want to continue those payments."
Sure.
So the solar utility program is not something that's new. It's been actually around probably since about 2016 ish. I would say, and where it's just simply buying power. Now, the benefits of it is that after 5 years, that homeowner can actually buy the system at the depreciated value. So rather than, again, those loans that had those big high buy down fees, now you're getting that system at that kind of, let's say, cash price, and then whatever it depreciated at, you could buy it outright and own it. So that's one option with the PPA. If there's a new homeowner that let's say they say, "Hey, I don't want to continue on the solar utility program or the PPA payments," they could buy the system at the depreciated value. So that is one way. And then the other way is just a transfer.
Can I ask a question based on that? If they were to do that, let's say my seller is selling a property, the buyer comes in and says, "I don't want to pay this solar payment. I want to pay PG&E instead," or I don't even know what their option would be. What would that look like? My seller pays it off, and then the buyer gets that lower rate to buy the power. They're just not making they're not making a payment for it, or what would that look like?
Yeah, if they actually want to own it outright, they could. Yeah, they could ultimately just buy out the rest of the system at the depreciated value, and then the next homeowner just ultimately would not have a PG&E bill or a solar bill at that point. So really, that's up to the buyer and the seller at that point. You have a good point on that. Now, given where solar is now, and we can kind of dive into this a little bit later, I probably would advise against doing that now under the new changes that the state has made. Mostly because if you buy the system out, you lose all the warranties that PPA really covers. So the power,
because I was not educated on any of this previously, and I've gone through probably 12 solar transfers. You gave me a lot of education on that. So can you speak to that, like how things are warranted and why you'd want to go with PPA?
Yeah, so the PPAs are really great right now because given the state of California and the new net metering changes, it actually requires homeowners to be more self-independent, which means that they have to add batteries, which are very costly. Sometimes the batteries actually are more expensive than the actual solar system itself. So those batteries, and we are one of the biggest Tesla Powerwall installers in the greater Bay Area in Sacramento. Tesla warranties their batteries for 10 years. So what I tell every homeowner is, given what Tesla says that those batteries will last 12 to 15 years, it's just as good as if you buy a car warranty and you have a 3-year, 36,000 mile, bumper to bumper warranty, right? No car, manufacturer is going to want to warranty a car for 1 million miles with unlimited years, because they know that there potentially will be something that goes wrong later down the road with that vehicle, right? So I always, tell my clients, hey, you're good and covered if you buy this system outright, and you buy the batteries for 10 years. But the big advantages with the PPA program is that they do warranty the batteries for 25 years, bumper to bumper. And you do almost guarantee yourself at least 1 to 2 free replacements within that 25-year period. So if you're buying batteries for, let's just say, $28,000, imagine doing that 2 or 3 times over the course of a 25-year, 25 years if you're in that home. So that is the big benefits. And that's why nowadays I do advise clients to not necessarily go ahead and buy the system when they do transfer the home or they do sell it. I do advise the new homeowners nowadays to just go ahead and continue and assume, the monthly payments that PPA does have with them.
And is there a standard for the amount of panels that you need to have and then the amount of batteries? Because you were telling me something about that the other day where, because there's so many, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I think there's some reasons that people are skittish about something that they don't really understand. And you broke down a lot of things for me in short order, like with the batteries and the amount of panels. So can you speak to that? Like
Yeah. So
where your sweet spot is?
Yeah, so every home is different. So I really tell clients, especially when we're meeting with them, let's just say if they've been in the home for more than a year, that we actually look at their usage, on a month-to-month basis, and we really analyze, the actual bill. Some people, they have family that come in December and their usage is sky high, but it's not necessarily every year. So we really want to look at their usage to see what that looks like. And with that usage, we do use a software that is, very expensive. It's actually one of the best solar softwares that is out in the market today. And they actually are analyzing potential 25 years of tree growth and weather patterns for that home specifically. The other factor, not outside of the usage, is that every home is orientated differently.
Sure.
For example, my home in Winters, I have a beautiful 2-story house, and my wife decided to pick the worst house with the worst roof location for solar, which is mostly all north. And we did have some south and east and west configuration, but majority of our panels are actually on the north facing side of the roof, which is actually producing less, meaning that I needed more panels on my roof to offset all my solar consumption, for that. So to answer your question, especially for a new homeowner that is coming in and maybe wanting to buy solar immediately, I always tell people that, we want to look at what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. We don't want to try to obviously get a little too personal, but that really plays into a factor nowadays because of the fact that, it's very different with, let's say a couple that's retired and maybe they're 65 and there's just 2 of them, maybe they get their grandkids every now and then, but, their usage is very low compared to somebody like myself that has, a family of 5 with a Tesla. And so, electric vehicles nowadays are actually playing a massive factor into how do we design systems. So for us, there's a lot of research that I've done over the last 10 years of my solar career. But more importantly is that if you're a new homeowner, we do want to ask a lot of the right questions to see how we can configure a system that's going to meet your needs accordingly. Now, what I tell every solar client is I've never had someone call me to complain that they've gotten too many panels, but I have had a ton of customers that I advise to get bigger systems, and then they call me to complain because it's not enough. Most of the time in solar, we see that a lot of clients get solar and they were very frugal, previously to getting solar. But then all of a sudden, once they get solar, their usage, goes way up. And statistically, up here in Northern California, where we're located at, SMUD, which is a local municipal utility company here in Sacramento County, there has been research done, and because SMUD's rates are so cheap, and same thing here in Roseville, where my office is located at, Roseville and SMUD consumers actually consume more power than a PG&E customer. And that's purely because they don't feel the pain when they leave the lights on or they have the AC set at 68 degrees. They're getting a bill of $150 compared to a PG&E customer that's, receiving a $500 bill. So that is one factor that I do tell every client to take in consideration. Nowadays, the way that solar works, well, actually, I'll take a step back. So when I went solar 5 years ago, the way that solar worked was they gave you a 1-for-1 credit for anything you produced, and you were
Okay.
actually grandfathered in for 20 years. With that being said, no one's at my house right now. My solar is producing a ton of power. It's actually going back into the grid because there's no one home. And then when I come home from work, I'm able to plug in my Tesla, and all the credits that I accumulated for a 1-for-1 value is actually I'm able to use at night. I'm able to charge my Tesla. I'm able to run the dishwasher, the laundry, and that's how I advise customers, quite a bit was to, hey, it's okay to start, using your power at night and
Yeah.
even during the day because you have your solar. Nowadays, after the changes, and I'll explain why this is really important. Nowadays, with the new changes that went into effect in April of 2023, new solar consumers, or if you add any solar, or if you add a battery nowadays, it actually puts you into what's called net metering 3.0, which no longer gives you that dollar for dollar value. And if you actually push any power back to the grid, PG&E is able to keep 95 cents on that dollar value, meaning you only get 5 cents back in credits. With that being said, that is why the batteries are coming into a big importance right now in the solar industry, because of the fact that you do have to go ahead and ultimately store your power during the day from what you're producing, and then be able to use it at night. Now to kind of touch back on NEM 2.0 versus 3.0, NEM 2.0, they would true you up annually. So I'm sure you've probably had clients that say, "Oh, I've got $1,000 bill from PG&E." It's because of the fact that over the course of a 12-month period, that system did not produce enough power for all of their electric consumption, and PG&E looked at it on an annual basis. And that's where those true-up bills kind of came into play. Nowadays, it is actually trued up on a month-to-month basis. So ultimately, before, I would tell clients it didn't, you ultimately didn't have to worry about the winter months. You're going to see a bill from PG&E, but don't worry about it. Wait until your trip comes around. Now we have to get enough solar to try to offset some of those winter months, because obviously we have a few things. We have the weather that plays a big factor, and then also the time change that we have, where we have shorter days. So that is a really big factor. Now, why I said I'm going to kind of touch back on that is because there is new legislation that passed where if you do sell your home, the next homeowner, even if you were in NEM 1.0 or 2.0, they will automatically be put into NEM 3.0.
So can you explain again? I heard about this and I'm like, I'm going to need to ask David about that. What does that mean? Can you break that down for people that don't know anything about solar? Like I didn't.
Yeah. So ultimately, let's just say, again, you were grandfathered in for 20 years, or for my house. I have NEM 2.0 for 20 years. And ultimately, if I sell my house, the next homeowner does not get that grandfathered in NEM 2.0 system. It automatically goes into NEM 3.0. So it's going to change a lot for people that are buying homes ultimately, because now they are going to have to look into a battery option to start saving.
My next question. Okay, so that is the fix for that. So if my buyer buys a house, and actually I'm showing more houses tonight, and the one we're looking at making an offer on has solar, and their solar is 18 cents a kilowatt, and I was like, oh, I just met with David. I actually know that's a really good deal, right? They got it.
It's a really good deal, yeah.
Years ago. They don't have a backup battery. So they may be using this net 2 system you just spoke of, where they're selling it back to PG&E. It's a good deal for them, no problem. But when my buyer purchases this home, if it is the home and we negotiate well enough, they're not going to have that ability. It's going to go to a net 3, and everything that they use during the day is going to be great. And anything at night, they're going to be buying back from PG&E at a higher rate unless they have a backup battery. So how do you overcome that? They already have a system. They're already on a lease. They have a lease payment for this because they got it 6 years ago. How do we overcome that?
Yeah, the biggest thing would be to add batteries, and that's the biggest way. And again, to touch on NEM 3.0 and how we build systems out, one of the questions I always ask people is, ultimately, are you home during the day? Because if you're home during the day and you're able to use that power, then great. But if the average American that is running to school and going to work, and then we got soccer practice and stuff like that, ultimately all that power is just going back to the grid. Your home does use some power during the day, like even if you turn off all your lights, I mean, you still have your Wi-Fi, your refrigerator,
Refrigerator, yeah.
yeah, all the refrigerators, everything's
Right.
digital now. You got your
Uh-huh.
Alexas plugged in.
Yep.
You're still using some power, but it's not nearly as much. And even let's just say you are an elderly couple, or maybe you're in your 60s or 70s and you buy a house with solar on it. I always tell folks like that too is there's no way for you to use all that solar, given the fact that solar can produce so much power at once, depending on the orientation of the panels. There's almost no way to capture all of it, even if you tried. Especially retired folks, they're not doing laundry every day. They're doing
Yeah.
laundry every couple days, maybe even once a week, because they don't need to, right? So that is another thing that we would have to look at and factor in is what does your day-to-day schedule look like? When are you home? When are you not home? And that is something when we are building systems that we do ask customers, just to help us get a better gauge on what their day-to-day life looks like.
Yeah, no, I think I need I don't know. I don't know if this was your show. Like mine was a GTL. Like that's my life, gym tan laundry.
Mm-hmm.
If that's your life, you're using laundry constantly. Like my washer is always going. So I think it
Yeah.
does definitely depends on lifestyle, but this makes a case for batteries and needing it. So if we go into this property or any other for that matter, where there's already a lease on hand and they don't have the $10,000 because we're going to spend all of our money just getting into a property, right? Then there's no money. How do you get a
Yeah.
battery then? Are you still able to use a PPA to get a battery if you already have a solar lease?
You can. There's a few different ways you could go about it. More banks are now offering. You can't do a PPA on just batteries because again, PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement,
Okay.
right? So you are there's no way to buy power from a battery, but there are different options you can look at. One is obviously to finance a battery if you wanted to. Coming up in 2026, the 30% federal tax credits are going away. But there
Okay.
are other incentives depending on the area you live in. So one of the big things that we did quite a bit, which is called self-generated incentive program by PG&E in
Uh-huh.
the state of California. They do offer battery rebates for customers that get batteries. In certain factors, if you live in an area that is high fire risk,
Uh-huh.
PG&E will actually, and depending on certain requirements and approvals, some of them may require medical. So if you are on a CPAP for helping you sleep at night, maybe you have somebody in the home that has a medical condition that needs the electricity. Ultimately, we could potentially get you funded fully for the batteries 100%. So I don't guarantee that to customers. I don't want to promise something that I can't uphold because it's out of my control. All I can do is the paperwork. But that is another way that we could look at it. The other factor would be, banks are doing leases for batteries now where they'll offer a 20-year lease at a very low monthly payment. But if it were me, again, it really falls back on what is that previous homeowner's experience with the solar. Well, were they getting a true up for one? The other thing would be is that maybe it is an elderly couple that didn't use a lot of power and they just have a small system, and then now you move a family of 4 or 5, and I can tell you, like you said about the laundry, I do more laundry for my kids than myself. So that is the other factor. If you're a family and you have kids and you're constantly doing laundry, and kids are leaving the lights on and things like that, I would look at it more in the sense of maybe let's add more panels and batteries to the system to help you overall, rather than maybe just doing a battery. Because for us in the solar industry, solar has changed over the last 10 years. I've been doing, I've been in this industry. For example, we were using 180 watt panels, which were the big or the small square ones, and people's houses were filled with them because you needed more panels to offset. Now we're using 435 watt panels that are our standard panels that are producing way more power. They're way more efficient. The older panels, they were degrading at over 1% annually. So that's another factor to kind of consider, is that those panels were degrading very, very quickly. So in 10 years, they're going to be down to 90%. In 20 years, they're going to go down to 80% or less. The panels we use now, they're pretty standard. They actually degrade about 0.3% annually. So over a course of a 25-year period, those panels that we're putting on today will still be about 91 to 92% efficient from day one of us installing them. So that is another factor to kind of consider. The other factor, we actually did a system the other day in Vacaville, and that homeowner purchased a home, and they were the older panels. and they were already paid off with the house. And the homeowner just looked at me and she goes, "It makes no sense to continue on and just add a smaller system. Let's just remove the old system. If I'm already going into net metering 3.0, remove the old system and just put a brand new system that I know is going to be efficient for 25 years rather than having two separate systems." And back in the day, most of the panels that we were using, there's two ways to actually convert power. One is actually to go ahead and use a DC configuration, which is called a string inverter. And we still use those today, but they're a lot more efficient than the ones that we used back in the day. And then the other one is called microinverters, and those are AC coupled. The DC coupled inverters that we were using 10 years ago had massive recalls. People were having troubles with them. Ultimately, some of those companies are actually not even around anymore because they went out of business due to how many warranty claims that they had. And then customers were left with basically art on their roof with an inverter that wasn't operating. They didn't know who to call and things like that. So that is the other factor is those string inverters, like I mentioned, they only carry a 10-year warranty on them. So those do need to be replaced very soon. So the other factor too for a buyer is to know how old that system is. What does that system really look like? Do I really want to continue with a system that ultimately may need a new inverter, and now you're having to pay the cost to get a brand new inverter installed on that older system? It almost makes sense to just remove the system at that point and put a brand new one on.
So what
The
I'm hearing,
microinverters.
yeah, if you're buying a house that has solar on it, you really want to do some research to know what you're going into and what your liabilities are and what the benefits are. And that may not be something you just know off the top of your head.
Yeah, and here's the other factor I think too is partnering with the right solar company, but also too a solar expert or a solar sales consultant that has been doing this quite a bit is very beneficial. And the reason why I say that is I get calls from previous customers a lot that are saying, "Hey, we're selling our old house, we're buying this one, it has solar on it. Can you help me just look at the system and tell me potentially what my what factors I should be considering?" And that goes a long way for people, right? Because now they know they have somebody that they can trust and really actually look at the system and then give them the best advice. In certain circumstances, I look at it and I say, "No, this has microinverters. It's a decent system. Maybe it was a panel that I know that I can trust. Maybe it's a panel that I have on my house." And I tell them, "Hey, best thing you could do is buy the house. Let's kind of reassess in a few months after you sell you buy your house. And then let's kind of look at our options then rather than just, jumping into something month one." That is also something to kind of consider too when you're buying a house is to really have someone that you can trust. Unfortunately, in the solar industry that I've found is a lot of these companies, especially going door to door, they don't really train their sales reps on how the systems operate, how they work, and they really try to keep it as simple as possible to ultimately, obviously get the deal and sell the account. But if you called that sales rep, in 6 months and asked them questions on something similar, they may not have the right answers for you because they ultimately just don't have the right knowledge of how solar works, how the batteries work, and things of that nature.
No, that's good to know. Where would you think that the sweet spot is for somebody who has a bill over, X amount of dollars? That this is something that they should probably look into, especially this PPA that you're speaking of. Like, where's the sweet spot?
As far as their true up, is that kind of your
Or
question?
their PG&E bill. If you have a bill that's over X amount of dollars, it's probably something you should look into. And then I've got a follow-up question from there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. When I started selling solar 10 years ago, the rates were down to 16 cents a kilowatt hour.
Wow.
And the highest rate was maybe 23 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay.
Now our rates are all the way up to 60 cents a kilowatt hour. And even down in Southern California, Edison, where we do have, salespeople and we're actually installing solar, their peak charges are all the way up to like 74 cents a kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So really where solar benefits customers is you are ultimately buying that control back of knowing that you have a solid monthly payment with a kilowatt hour rate that is good for you, and ultimately you're betting against inflation without any sort of output as far as expenses go. So really, in my opinion, what I always tell people is there's no savings account, there is no stock or crypto's big. There's nothing, there's no investment nowadays where you can actually put no money into it and ultimately start seeing savings month one. So even for our clients that are on the care discount, right? Care discount is only a percentage. It's 20% off of the PG&E bill or the cost. Nowadays, we're seeing that solar is even outperforming customers that are low using and on care. So really, that's the biggest thing is you're hedging your bet against PG&E not going up. And I think we can all agree that that's not going to happen with PG&E. They're going to continue to go up. And for solar consumers, really that bill amount that you're talking about, we have customers that literally are only saving $25 a month, but they would rather, that includes them getting a battery backup system too. So the other factor, even when you're looking at solar and the savings factor is, with these outages, you really have to consider, is that worth it for you? Because in a lot of different areas, even in the cities, we're seeing outages, quite a bit. And that's something that you have to really, take into consideration. So I would say that, really, if your bill is over $300 a month, you should really look into solar. Our average bill that we see now, that was $300 when I went solar 5 years ago, is now upwards of about $500 a month for just the electricity side of things. So that is a new factor you have to really consider. The other thing I would say too is if a lot of these new home builders that are building homes, they are no longer using gas. It's almost 100% all electric heat pumps.
Used to this. Yep.
So that is another factor for you. If you buy a house and they have a small system already established on it, you're going to want to add more solar panels, because my house, when I bought it brand new in 5 years ago, there was only 8 panels on there. Well, for me and my family, 8 panels was not going to cut it. So we actually added up to an additional 24 panels on our house, just to offset all of our usage. So that's another factor you have to take in consideration. There's a lot more incentive programs for homeowners to actually get these electric heat pumps. But the heat pumps can be very dangerous. And the reason why I say this to people is because I've had retired people that is in, the generations, well before me. And, very similar to like my grandfather, it was, hey, if we're leaving the house, turn off the thermostat. Hey, if we're going to bed, turn off the thermostat, and then they turn it on in the morning. And that's very dangerous for these heat pumps, because these heat pumps are running off electricity. Natural gas is instant. So if I turn off my heater with natural gas and I decide to turn it back on, that house is going to be heated in 5 to 10 minutes. Where electricity, they actually take a lot more power and it takes a lot longer. So I've seen customers that were spending almost what it would take for me to charge my Tesla every day, just because they were turning off their heat pumps, at night and in the morning, and then turning it back on. So it's better for heat pumps. And my best advice to consumers that have electric heat pumps is to actually set the thermostat that you want it at. So maybe it's 67 or 68 degrees, and just leave it on all the time once winter starts, because at that point, it doesn't have to, it's not as harsh for that system to go ahead and heat that house up, rather than it being a constant. And it's similar to like hot tubs. And I know we're kind of going to two different things, but I purchased a hot tub for my house, and the guy said, hey, set it at 100 degrees temperature and leave it there. And I was like, that's kind of crazy. Why would I do that? And he was like, because he goes, it takes way more electricity to heat that hot tub up, going from 70 degrees or whatnot to 100, rather than just leaving on at 100 or 98, whatever you want. It's way more energy efficient to do so, rather than go ahead and turn it off and then turn it back on.
Interesting. Yeah. The other question that I had for you was, and I brought this up when I met with you, and you gave me such great education on so many things. But one of the objections that I've heard, I have one of my friends' parents wanted to buy a system, and they said, we want to buy a system rather than doing the PPA, because the PPA is going to go up incrementally this much. And so my question to you, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm asking you, isn't PG&E going up another 20% this year? Like, how do you offset that? How do you overcome an objection like that? And how do you offset the 20% that PG&E, like, it's random. They're just going to go up whenever they feel like going up. You don't have any control.
Well, I'll say this. If you do have the cash to buy solar, that's going to be your quickest return on investment. We could see customers see as low as like 4 years, 5 years return on investment with solar. But not everybody has the cash in hand. And the one thing I always, ask people when they talk about cash, I always say, well, is it cash in the bank, or are you selling your stocks off? Or are you pulling out of your retirement? Because now you're getting hit with taxes that, for an additional 10-20% on top of it just to buy your solar. So now you have to consider that into your ROI, right? So that is another factor that you need to look at. Also, too, with like we discussed already earlier, is the batteries and warranting them, and ultimately having to, not most likely you will need to buy a new battery in about 12 to 15 years. You have to weigh all those options out compared to a PPA. The other factor with the power purchase agreement, like you mentioned, with a homeowner that maybe is meeting with different solar companies, they want to ask them, what is the escalator on this PPA agreement? You have several different, a lot of, most of the solar industry is going to a 3.5% escalator, which is, it's totally fine. That's still beating PG&E. Even if they were going up 5 to 10%, you're still ahead because of the fact of where the rates are. And if you have a much lower rate for solar, you're already saving month one. So there's that factor. But the other factor too, you have to kind of consider when you're looking at it is, you do have the option of doing like a 0% escalator. So ultimately you could say, hey, I don't want my bill to ever go up with solar. I just want it flat monthly payment, and I'll know what I'm paying for the next 25 years. You absolutely can do that. But you will see that. Yeah. So ultimately, again, banks are smart, right? I tell everybody, they're going to get their money one way or the other. So, for example, we just set up a customer where their monthly bill with solar, their bills were almost $600. We did a 2.99% escalator at a little under 300. It was like 275. So it cut their bill in half. But they said, no, we want to pay a monthly payment guaranteed. So their bill at the 0% escalator was $525. So again, banks aren't giving out free money. So the escalators will actually determine what your monthly bill will be depending on which option you go with. Now, as far as the 0%, it will pay out dividends if you do a 0%. Normally, you'll see about year 12 to maybe 15 that it will ultimately outbeat maybe a 3.5 or a 2.99% escalator. But you have to take in consideration, again, is this your forever home? Is this something that you're going to be in for the next 25 years? And are you okay with basically giving up all your savings that you would have had on the 2.99 to 3.5% now? Are you okay with paying $200 extra for your PPA program and not get those savings immediately? Because really that's what it boils down to, is you're going to get all the savings on the higher escalators now compared to if you just do a 0%, and now you have to wait about 12 years or so to actually finally see it get caught up. So that is a big factor in that as well. So I would tell people just to do their research and to really weigh out their options before making that decision. But ultimately, I would say majority of our clients do either the 2.99% or the 3.5%. Now, as far as flipping that versus a cash customer that is very adamant, we absolutely love doing cash jobs. We do them very quickly here, and we do it very efficiently. It's no different in the process for installation, whether it's a PPA or a cash purchase. But again, not everybody can, they have the cash to do that right now. And then the second option is, the 30% federal tax credits. We're almost in September right now. We only have about 4 months, and then the 30% is gone. So really, in my opinion, it's, if you're going to do cash, you want to do it relatively quickly. You want to pick up the phone and start looking at options now, because as an installer, we are getting very, very busy, and we're not going to be able to get everybody installed before the end of the year to get those 30% federal tax credits back for you. Moving into 2026, in my personal belief, and I do a lot of speaking engagements with a lot of investors and things like that, as well as different solar companies throughout the state. I am on the phone with at least a few CEOs every single week. In my personal opinion, I think it's going to be about 95% power purchase agreement coming into 2026 here in California. And I think maybe cash is going to be 5%. There's going to still be customers that, absolutely want to pay cash, and we would be happy to do that. But you're really going to see a big flip. When I started in solar in 2016, it was very lease and PPA heavy. And that was good for about 2 years. And then most of the customers then flipped to either a cash purchase or even a financing option like we discussed earlier, or even the credit unions. And that ran for about 5 years. And then with these new net metering changes, now we're seeing it is mostly all, actually I'd say, yeah, from net metering 3.0 till now, we are, at least for our business, we're about 90% PPA and about 10% cash. So I see those numbers drastically going down for many different installers as well coming into 2026. A lot of installers don't even offer the PPA programs. A lot of installers just do cash and loan. And in 2026, the other thing that I think homeowners need to be aware of is, in my personal opinion, I think we're going to see a lot more solar installers going out of business next year. So that is a factor you have to really consider as well. These PPA programs are very different. A lot of different installers do not know how to offer them, as well as working with the banks and the funding department for them to get reimbursed on it. So with that, I would definitely urge customers to keep an eye and things like that, because we are going to see a big shift coming next year.
Oh, that's good to know. So I heard, and I think you're gonna have to come back because there's so many questions I think our audience is gonna have. But what I heard is, a PPA can be a great idea as long as you know what you're walking into and you want the backup batteries to be warranted for 25 years rather than a cash purchase. If you do want to think about a cash purchase, you better think about it right now and get David to take a look at your bill, take a look at what your goals are for these next, 5 to 10 years, so you know what you're walking into. And if you are somebody who's working with a realtor that you're going into a house with solar, you really need to know if it's a lease, because it's going to change your net metering, as you said, as that changes. And without a backup battery, unless you're home during the day using all of your power, that's the significant savings that maybe an elderly couple had, which I see a lot of elderly couples that are selling their home all day. When you sell it to my couple that's gone all day working and has children and they're not back till after 6, the bill is definitely going to be different. So I've always known to ask for the bill in PG&E and ask for the bill if it's solar, so I can see what that differential was. But this new net metering that I just found out about, thanks to you, that's going to change everything. So you really, you need to do so much more research now. If you are thinking of taking on a property that has solar, you really need to know what you're walking into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the big thing that is ever changing here in the solar industry. And we've seen it with legislation, right? We saw it with net metering 3.0. That was the big thing and a big rush. We saw a huge rush in 2023 of homeowners going solar and trying to get in before the deadline. We saw a very, very big rush. And then, now it's the new legislation that ultimately, if you sell your house, you are getting put into the net metering 3.0. And then obviously now with the big, beautiful bill, we are seeing, it mostly come down to the 30% federal tax credits going away. The other factor too, I think, with the 30% federal tax credits going away, homeowners that ultimately were looking at a PPA this year, you have to imagine that with the 30%, that's how a lot of these PPAs are actually funded, are by the incentives. So you are going to see an increase in the PPA market as well. So maybe somebody offered you a $200 PPA payment, that might go up to $250 to $300 next year. I don't know. We'd have to really look at it. So that is a factor that I think homeowners that are looking at solar, I can't, urgently stress the importance of how important it is to get those projects installed, hopefully before the end of the year. So definitely something I'll obviously consider for clients.
No, I really appreciate it. Well, I'm sure I'm going to come up with 5 other questions, because just in my life in real estate, I run into so much of this, and I know more now with spending some time with you in your office than I did the other day. I know what a good rate is. I know about this net metering change. I know how long batteries are warranted for. I didn't know any of this, 10 days ago. So I think it's really important for somebody who's looking into this to have somebody who's an expert, who's been in the game for a long time and can answer those questions as to what is known right now versus what the unknown is next year. because none of us know none of us know. We don't know if rates are going to change. We don't know if the net, what the net metering is going to look like next year. We just don't know. We only know what we have right now. So you really need to speak to a solar expert. And it's Sunup, and we're going to link all of your everything so somebody could get in touch with you. I think everybody knows how to reach me, but especially if you're somebody looking into this and you're looking at purchasing, call me direct, because you need to make sure that you're working with a realtor that understands, number one, how easy it is to transfer things, but second to that, make sure that we know what that transfer is going to look like, whether you're on the selling side or the buying side, because that's an important piece that I didn't know until I met David, that I just don't
And I
think
think,
about.
yeah, I think the other factor too is, and we were kind of talking about this offline, is, I actually gave a speech to Solano County Board of Real Estate Agents and Mortgage Brokers maybe about 4 years ago now. And, the biggest thing that I stressed to them is that a lot of real estate agents just don't know the process of solar and transferring these. Part of the agreement in a power purchase agreement, it does say they cannot hinder the sale of your home.
Mhm.
So part of it is they do make it, and a lot of these companies do have a dedicated departments within their companies to just transfer the sale of the home. So it is a lot easier, but a lot of these real estate agents that are just not educated and they don't know how to actually handle the process, they really urge their customers not to go solar because it's a headache. But most of the time, it's just because it's a headache for the real estate agent that just doesn't know the process to transfer the sale, for a power purchase agreement. And it's hurt the industry. It's hurt a lot of customers, in my personal opinion, because of the fact that a lot of these customers could have been saving way more money. And again, if they would have gotten, I tell this to every customer, if I would have met you 5 years ago, you would have saved way more money over the course of 5 years, rather than waiting to this point where we have PG&E rates at an all-time high. When I started in solar, maybe the average bill was, like I said, $200, $250. And now these customers are all the way up to $600, sometimes all the way up to $1,000 a month, depending on how their usage is. So that is a big factor to obviously consider, especially talking to your real estate agent, making sure that they're well versed in solar. And then again, like I said earlier, the flip side is that if your real estate agent isn't familiar or they don't have the knowledge, to partner with a solar company that they trust and can lean on and ask questions. I get phone calls from real estate agents all the time that have questions on, whether they're selling a home or they're helping a buyer with questions on solar. And I'm happy to be a resource and a connection on that to give my honest opinion and unbiased too. That's the biggest thing that I think is really important, is to give people the right information on that. One thing I did want to, I guess we'll go back onto the usage aspect and why we're increasing with these electric cars that are coming out. They are using a lot of power, and a lot of homeowners that get electric cars, they buy one and they fall in love, and then they sell the wife's car that was, a Camry or a gas, and they get them into a Tesla or an electric vehicle because they love electric vehicles way more than gas powered vehicles now. So that is a massive factor that we're seeing, is a massive uptick in people's electric bills because of these electric vehicles. And that's honestly, that's the biggest reason why PG&E went to this net metering 3.0 system, because of the fact that these electric cars are putting such big demand on the grid. Right.
And right. Because everyone's at work during the day, they come home. And that's what I do. Come home and I charge my car at night. So this highest rate, I mean, thank God I'm in the city of Roseville, but this highest rate you're paying. So I just ran into this with a friend that said this. He sold his Tesla because even though he has solar, the bill went up $400 a month. And I'm like, what are you charging? Oh, overnight. And just because I had met you, I'm like, well, now I know enough. It's like, you're paying a higher bill because you're charging at night and you're buying it back from PG&E at a higher rate and you're selling it to them at a lower rate. So,
well, and that could be because of the fact that they don't have a battery, right?
That is the
and
fact,
the other,
yes.
and the other factor too is that with, and I would say this, if you have a Tesla and you go charge it at a charging station, you're going to spend more charging it at a charging station than you would at your own home if you had enough solar to offset your vehicle. So, you could get down to, again, if you're doing a PPA, you're getting that, maybe the PPA down to 25 cents, give or take, and you're going to the local charging station and they're charging 40 cents. I mean, you're ultimately paying more for electricity if you go to a charging station. Now, the other factor I kind of stress with people is, Tesla is ultimately one of the best batteries in the market that you could get for your home. Whether or not people have, like Elon, that's a whole nother conversation for another time. We'll have to do another podcast for that.
Oh, yeah, you're coming back.
But with that, we ultimately, I went to Tesla about 5 or 6, well, actually like 5 years ago, when before net metering 3 went into effect, and we heard this is a possibility. And I had my Tesla, and we're looking at the different configurations. And so, I'm talking to Tesla's engineering team, and they said, well, what would you do if you don't have a battery, or maybe you do, or actually, yeah, if you have a battery, but you don't want to add a second battery to that system because batteries are expensive.
Sure.
And I said, well, the cool thing would be is I would want to come home and plug in my car and charge my car from the solar, from the excess that the battery can't have, rather than it going back to the grid. And Tesla put it into effect, and they have what's called charge on solar. So you can actually trickle charge your car with the excess power that the solar is producing, that the battery, let's say the battery is already full, rather than it going into the grid, it could charge your Tesla. And it's only Tesla to Tesla right now. I wish I would have gotten them to at least give me some royalties or something on that, because that would be kind of nice. But I did laugh, and I did tell a very high up executive. I was like, you guys kind of took my idea, and I definitely gave you guys this one. But yeah, so that is something that's in effect. It doesn't work if you have, a different electric vehicle. There's so many now on the roads. So that is something to kind of consider. I was doing some research. I have a client right now looking at buying a Hummer EV, and those are getting very more popular. The Cybertrucks are out. These electric trucks use way more electricity than, let's say, a Tesla Model 3 or a Tesla Model Y.
Okay.
And so I actually did some research for my client, and he goes, oh, it's gonna be for my wife, it's gonna be locally, pick up the kids, go run errands, go to dinner. Like, we're gonna use it not more for a long trip, type of vehicle. It's just more, going day to day. I did some research, and with my Tesla Model 3, if I'm at empty, it takes about 65 to 70 kilowatt hours to charge my car fully. And that's if I'm on empty and I go to a full charge. With the Hummer EV at a full charge, it takes 240 kilowatt hours. Now, if you're doing that twice a week, that's about 500 kilowatt hours, give or take, a week. You can obviously do the math times 4. You're looking at almost 2,000 kilowatt hours, give or take, on a single month to charge your Hummer EV. Obviously, do that by 12. That system right there is probably almost, it would take almost, 2 houses that we normally set up just to power that Hummer EV. So nowadays, it takes way more power, way more solar to go ahead and charge these electric cars.
Well, now that everyone has an electric car, this is just one more reason that, like, if you don't have solar, it's something you need to look into. And if you're an average family that is at work during the day and you come home in the evening and you're doing your laundry and you're cooking and you're doing all the things that have electricity, like, it's another reason that I think you have to look into it. Unless you're in the city of Roseville, where there's not as much of a change because we're paying less. I don't know how long that'll be the case. I don't know. All the new houses have solar, which is another thing I hadn't even considered until you said it. You don't know, unless they have enough solar panels and a backup battery, you're not necessarily coming out ahead if you're just buying solar. And a lot of the new homes, they won't include it. They say you either have to have a lease or you can purchase it. That's your option, and it's on top of their great price, because that's how they get you in. Like, oh, I have this great rate, but you're gonna, we also have Melrose, we have an HOA. Like, it's all they're getting paid some way. And then you have to have solar. We're not giving it to you. Some of the builders will, most of them won't. You have to have a lease or you have to purchase it. So in that situation, I don't know that you have the option to come in with the PPA, or you just have to go with one of those options. But if that's
you have to go with one of those options.
Yeah.
And the issue too with the new builders, especially some of the big ones, like that are out there. I don't want to get sued, so I'm not going to say the names, but a lot of the big builders that you're seeing now, they have these small systems, and they already have contracts in place with a lot of different installers. And SunPower, before they went out of business, was a really big one with a lot of these builders. And what I found when I went and got my solar is that the price for the solar that these new homes are added to are literally, in my opinion, way overinflated because of the fact that they know you have to buy it or lease it.
Uh-huh.
There's no option. So in my opinion, I ended up, obviously because I'm in the industry, I negotiated my solar way down, but I had to do that with SunPower because SunPower was the one that installed the solar for my house. But I told them, for my house, they wanted almost $24,000 for 8 panels. And I said I could have gotten 20 panels at that price rather than 8. And so they way overinflate it because they make way more margins in those because they know you don't have another option.
That's really interesting. So for somebody who does, like yourself, who has 8 panels and that's not enough for your family, as you mentioned, you could still additionally get into a PPA right now, if that's your case. And
Mhm.
you're like, I have panels, I still have a bill, I'm not happy. Maybe it's not enough panels. They could go with Sunup and get a PPA, have backup batteries, and have additional solar to offset whatever their usage is, and then they wouldn't worry about getting their electric car or hot tub and using that in the evening.
Yep, absolutely. And one thing I actually did just think about right now is you asked like what would be a bill that you would consider,
Yeah.
adding, solar. Ultimately, one of the things is the true up bill is what we get asked quite a bit is, I have a $1,500 true up or a $2,000 true up. What does that look like? Should I do it? Should I not? And what I tell every customer now is if legislation can pass things such as this, where you have a grandfathered in contract and you sell your home and the next homeowner doesn't, they have to adopt it in M 3.0. What does that mean for every one of us that have been grandfathered in for 20 years? So if you're on the fence of, well, should I do it? Should I not? If I add solar now, I'm going to get kicked in an M 3.0. To me, really, it doesn't matter because legislation right now, they're changing things all the time. So they could eventually say, hey, you know what? All those people that grandfathered in for 20 years, sorry, we're going to go ahead and put you in an M 3.0 anyways. And really PG&E and the state of California are so well tied and connected. That wouldn't shock me whatsoever if that was the case. So for me, and what I tell clients now is, really, the big benefit is if we add the batteries, it doesn't matter anymore because really you're going to, that system's going to operate the same as it did last, your last year, however long you had it. The only difference is we're just managing it more here at your house rather than, sending it back to PG&E's grid. Right now, well, I'll take a step back. Prior to 2023, I'd always tell customers, really you getting solar is to try to be as independent as possible. And it would help you, fight back against PG&E a little bit. Now, that is more true than ever because now you don't really have to rely on PG&E. You are now basically creating your own utility all at your house with those batteries. You are in full control and you're really eliminating PG&E altogether. And that's our goal is to try to eliminate as much exposure or really you using PG&E. That's the main focus.
No, I love that. This was such a good, insightful conversation about all the things that I think my people have questions about that I didn't know until I met with you. So I would encourage you, if you've got questions, reach out. We're going to link everything for David. I definitely want to have you back on because you're just a wealth of knowledge in this space, all the way down to this net metering thing that I had heard talk of, but I didn't know what it meant for a homeowner. Something I have to be well educated on as a realtor. So I would also encourage you, if you're a realtor, partner up with a company that knows what they're doing and that you can get these kind of answers. Because if I've got questions and, maybe you do too. So I want to make sure if you've got questions and you want to make sure you're doing your best by your buyers and your sellers like I do, partner up with a company that has all of those answers and that's easily available.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other factor too, and before we end, is there are a lot of solar companies that are 100% online. And what I tell customers is we are very competitive in the marketplace for our pricing when it comes to solar. But you will see like Tesla, that's probably one of the biggest things that a lot of customers ask is, well, Tesla's pricing's this, and you're coming in at this price. For us, we come out on site and look at your home, look at your electrical, because that all plays into a factor.
Sure.
And there's a lot of other companies that are purely online companies that don't do that. And then, you sign a contract, they come out and review everything and they go, oh, shoot, well, we might need to do a main panel upgrade, or we have to do extra electrical work. And then they're
You
hitting
need a
you
new roof,
with it.
or
You might need a new roof,
you need to
right?
chop down 10 trees. Yeah, that could really
Yeah.
change.
Yeah, so that is one thing that I am very cautious with customers, is that what you see online for pricing is really not what it takes to install those projects, until you get somebody that's an expert come out to your house and actually look at what you're going to need, and definitely advise them to if they are going to get multiple quotes, you definitely take that in consideration. If they're saying a very, I always tell people, when it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true normally. So keep
So
that in mind.
to that point, if somebody gets a quote and they're like, I don't know if this is a good quote, like I always do this with my lender, because my lender has been with me for many years, and he always gets the best rate. So when people are like, oh, my Uncle Bob does loans, or well, an uncle's probably a bad example, my Uncle Bob has a guy, right? I'm like, well, let's
Mhm.
compare that number, because you've done this once or twice in your lifetime and we're doing this multiple times a month. Let's look at those numbers and get a side-by-side comparison in a second look. Is that something you can offer as well in the solar game? If someone has a quote and they're like, I don't know if this is good or not, I don't know if I need 3 batteries, do I? Can you take a look at that and decipher what's what?
Yeah, we typically do. And what I always tell people is, we're happy to give you an apples to apples comparison, and show you that we are pretty aggressive, and we're normally not very far off on pricing. But at the end of the day, is that what's best for your home when you're dealing with somebody that is maybe an online company and they're based out of LA, and they don't live in your area, they don't know what's happening here in the jurisdictions and things like that, or even what electrical codes. Every jurisdiction is very different when it comes to permits and electrical codes and things like that. So, we are happy to do a side by side comparison, but sometimes I'll even tell customers, we'll offer you this system. I don't mind. This is not what's best for your home. If you're willing to sign a document with us saying that you will not be mad and write me a bad review at the
Uh,
end of the day, because we do not recommend this system. We recommended this one, and we're happy to do that. But a lot of times that is the biggest factor that we find with hurdles is, again, the education side of things, even within, some of these door-to-door local companies, again, not training reps accordingly. And again, we have the software in place where we can show you exactly what your bill is going to look like with PG&E. So I can show you, exactly how to build it out, like this other company, but here's what your leftover bill is going to be with PG&E. Do you really want to pay that? Or do you just want to go with our recommendation with, maybe adding another battery to that system? I know it's going to be a little bit more expensive, but look at the bigger return on this. So yeah, we definitely do that. And we're happy to meet with people and show them their options for everything, and ultimately try to recommend them the best system that's going to work for their house.
Yeah, but it sounds like there's some strategy involved in this. This isn't a one size fits all, same as alone in a house. Like that's what we're really big on, is the strategy. So let's look at what your goal is, what your bill is, and if we're really going to save you money and make sure that we're offsetting, that's the whole goal. And if you're not offsetting, just selling you a system, like, well, you're not going to refer anybody. And I live in a world of referrals, and I'm sure you do too. So I want to make sure we're really putting into that family strategy and what their 3 to 5 and 10 year game plan is, and what's going to be best for their home and selling, and all these factors that come up that, I mean, prior to meeting you, I didn't know half of these existed that I had to worry about.
Yeah, I sold 165 accounts in 2023, and I had almost a 70% referral rate. So I'm very big on referrals. I really like to tell customers that, we are like family. You can call me anytime if you have questions on the systems. And that's another thing I would recommend to your audience as well is, find a solar person that you're going to work with or you trust. And maybe it is your cousin or your uncle or your aunt or your family friend, things like that. Make sure, really ask them how long they've been doing solar, for one. But, at the end of the day, you want somebody that it's kind of like going to the dentist, right? You can call in a year and say, hey, I just wanted to see if this makes sense. Can you look over my PG&E bill and make sure that this is all working properly? Because a lot of times we see this quite a bit in this industry, where sales reps will go out and sell a home and they're no longer in the industry after 6 to 8 months. And the other aspect is that the company doesn't want to take your calls because they don't want to deal with upset customers. And so for me, I always tell clients, if you're going to go solar with me, you can call me at any time. I give my personal cell phone number out, and really I'm happy to call them back in a year to follow up to make sure that the system is operating like it should.
and they are happy with their PG&E bill. And so, yeah, that is the biggest factor is just like a good real estate agent. You need to find a good solar person to actually help you and understand it. Because it can, like you said, I mean, we covered a lot today, but it can be very confusing for homeowners. And to make sure that you trust somebody to look at your bills and go, no, this is right. Look at your usage. It actually spiked compared to last year, or whatever the case may be. It's very, very invaluable.
Yeah. So yeah, you definitely want a power partner that you can rely on that's going to be there for the long haul. And I can attest to the fact that David does answer text messages and answers his phone. I mean, not everybody does. You can't count on that. You can't in this world.
Yeah, exactly.
Really appreciate all the knowledge and having you on. You're definitely going to have to come back. So if you guys have other questions that we didn't cover today, shoot me a text or a DM or however you're getting this, and we'll throw those in the next time.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Until next time. All right. See you later. Have a good day.